Welcome to Inside China AI. I'm Gabrielle Chou, and today I'm very happy to have Lucy back with me.
Thank you, Gabriel. It's great to be back.
Lucy, today we're talking about Tencent, and I want to start with something important. Tencent did release a new model, HY3 Preview, but that by itself is not the news.
Exactly. High 3 preview came out in late April, so we are not reacting to a breaking announcement today. The interesting question is what the launch tells us now that we can place it in context.
And the context is much bigger than Tencent launched another model.
Much bigger. The real story is not that Tencent entered the AI model race. It is that Tencent may be changing what the race is actually for.
So instead of asking, is HY3 better than DeepSeek, Qwen, Kimi, or Gemini, we should ask, what is Tencent trying to build around HY3?
Exactly, because Tencent's advantage is not only the model, it is the surfaces. Yuanbao, WorkBuddy, CodeBuddy, Tencent Cloud, and eventually Weixin.
That is why this episode matters. We are not just talking about one more model release. We are talking about whether the model itself is becoming infrastructure, and whether the real prize is the platform, the agent layer, and the user surface built around it.
That is the Tencent bet.
Let's start with a detail that almost sounds too perfect to be true.
The two Yao Shunyus.
Exactly. At Tencent, Yao Shunyu is the chief AI scientist leading the Hunyuan rebuild. At Google DeepMind, another Yao Shunyu works on Gemini.
Same Romanized name, different final Chinese character.
Same universities.
Same Tsinghua cohort. They know each other, they are friends. They used to spend time together in Silicon Valley.
But they were not classmates.
Correct. Same university cohort, same network, same strategic question, but not classmates.
And the strategic question is the interesting part.
Yes, both are thinking about a similar shift. Base models may become infrastructure, the durable value may move to the agent layer, the platform layer, and the applications that sit on top.
So this is not only a story about two people with the same name.
No, it is a story about two researchers inside two of the world's largest distribution platforms, Google and Tencent.
And both seem to understand that the model alone may not be the business.
Exactly. The model matters, but what gets built around the model may matter more.
Let's unpack the Google side first.
On Zhang Xiaojun business interviews, the Google DeepMind Yao Shunyu described a three-layer structure. Base models become infrastructure. Agent harnesses become the platform layer. Applications sit on top.
So base models are like IaaS.
Infrastructure as a service.
Agent harnesses are like PaaS.
Platform as a service.
And AI applications become SaaS.
Software as a service.
That is a very Google way of seeing the world.
It is. Because Google's advantage has never been just a model. Google has Search, Android, YouTube, Gmail, Workspace, Cloud, Maps, and distribution across billions of users.
So if models become infrastructure, that does not scare Google.
Not necessarily, because Google owns surfaces where the model can live.
And Tencent is the Chinese version of that logic.
In many ways, yes.
Now, let's go to Tencent. High 3 Preview was released on April 23rd.
Yes, it was the first artifact of the Hunyuan rebuild, led by Tencent's Yao Shunyu since December.
In the release statement, Tencent did say the expected things: more pre-training, more reinforcement learning, higher intelligence ceiling.
Right, that is standard model release language.
But there was one phrase that matters.
Deep co-design with Tencent's many products.
Deep co-design with Tencent's many products.
That is the phrase to hold on to.
Why?
Because a normal model release says, here are the benchmarks, here are the capabilities, here is how we compare with competitors.
Tencent is saying something else.
Tencent is saying, this model is being shaped by the products that will run on it.
So HY3 is not being treated as a standalone artifact.
Exactly. It is being designed against Yuanbao, WorkBuddy, CodeBuddy, Tencent Cloud, and potentially Weixin.
In other words, the model and the surface evolve together.
Yes, that is the key. The co-design is not just a slogan, it is operational.
Let's explain the rebuild, because Tencent moved unusually fast.
Very fast. In January 2026, Pony Ma told Tencent's annual meeting that the company had been slow on AI.
Which is unusually direct.
Very direct for a Chinese CEO, but it signalled something important. The AI rebuild had executive cover.
It was not a side experiment.
No. In February, Tencent restructured its pre-training and reinforcement learning infrastructure. In March, the standalone Tencent AI lab was folded into the Hunyuan team.
So Tencent stopped running AI research and AI productization as separate tracks.
Exactly. Everything was routed into one large LLM organization, reporting to one chief AI scientist, building one set of models designed against Tencent's products.
And then came Yuanbao.
Yes, Tencent's flagship consumer AI assistant.
For most of 2025, Yuanbao had been running on DeepSeek.
Right. DeepSeek was the celebrated open source model, the symbol of China's AI breakthrough that year.
So from a marketing perspective, powered by DeepSeek was not a bad thing.
Not at all. It gave Tencent an association with the hottest Chinese AI story of the year.
But in April, Yuanbao switched to Tencent's rebuilt in-house Hunyuan.
And that decision tells us a lot.
Because a company does not switch a flagship consumer product off a popular external model unless it has a reason.
Exactly. It means the model and the surface now need to evolve together.
Yuanbao is not running on Hunyuan because Hunyuan is necessarily the best model available.
Correct. It is running on Hunyuan because Tencent wants control over the full loop. Model, product, feedback, usage, optimization, and integration.
The assistant and the model need to learn from each other.
Exactly.
So when Tencent says deep co-design, Yuanbao is the proof.
Yes. Co-design is not theoretical. It is already happening.
Now let's talk about the HY3 launch behavior because it is quite revealing.
Hi3 Preview was released as open source. It sits on Tencent's GitHub alongside Hunyuan Video, Hunyuan Image, Hunyuan 3D, and embodied AI repositories.
So Tencent is not hiding it.
No, it wants the model to be seen, tested, adopted, and integrated.
It was also offered free on OpenRouter for the first 2 weeks.
Yes, and after that, it was priced at roughly half of comparable Chinese alternatives.
And this is the part that changed in the updated newsletter.
The paid version did not simply disappear after the free period. On OpenRouter's weekly leaderboard for the week of May 15th, Hi3 Preview was number 1 globally.
Ahead of Claude Opus.
Ahead of Claude Sonnet.
Ahead of DeepSeek.
Ahead of Kimi.
Ahead of Gemini.
And with 2.4 trillion tokens served that week.
That is not just a launch spike.
No, that is usage at scale.
But the strategic point is still that Tencent is not trying to maximize model layer revenue.
Exactly. Open release, free introductory period, low pricing, and massive adoption suggest a different goal.
Which is
make HY3 open, cheap, adopted, and widely used enough to become the default substrate beneath Tencent's own surfaces.
The model is the foundation,
not the product.
This is where the title comes in. Tencent is not entering the AI model race. It is changing what the race is for.
Exactly. HY3 at number 1 on OpenRouter is the lure. The platform layer underneath is the business.
So the shiny thing is not necessarily the thing Tencent wants to sell.
Right. The shiny thing gets attention. The surface captures value.
Let's define surface because it is easy to use the word and not explain it.
A surface is where the user actually interacts with AI. It can be a consumer app, a workplace tool, a developer environment, a cloud interface, a payment layer, a messenger, or an agent inside a platform.
So the model is invisible.
Often, yes.
The surface is where the user lives.
Exactly.
In Tencent's case, what are the surfaces?
Yuanbao for consumers, WorkBuddy for offices, CodeBuddy for developers, Tencent Cloud underneath, and eventually the agent layer inside Weixin.
Weixin is the big one.
Very big. Weixin has more than 1 billion monthly active users. It is messaging, payments, social graph, mini programs, services, and business infrastructure.
It is not just a chat app.
No, it is closer to a mobile operating layer for daily life in China.
So if Tencent builds an agent inside Weixin, that agent is not just answering questions.
Correct. It could sit between users and the entire Chinese consumer internet.
That is very different from launching a chatbot.
Completely different.
Let's bring in the counter-argument because this is not the only way to read AI value.
The strongest counter-argument comes from semi-analysis.
They argued that AI value is shifting toward model labs.
Yes, in the US context, the argument is strong. Model labs like Anthropic and OpenAI are capturing major revenue. Inference margins have improved. Closed models still outperform open models for many kinds of serious knowledge work. And frontier compute is constrained.
So if a lab has frontier quality, It can charge for the economic value its tokens deliver.
Exactly.
That sounds like the opposite of Tencent's argument.
It does at first, but it is not really a contradiction, because Tencent is not playing the US frontier model game as a revenue maximization play.
So semi-analysis may be right about the US.
Yes.
And Tencent may still be right about China.
Exactly.
Why?
2 structural reasons: compute and distribution.
Let's start with compute.
US export controls have left Chinese AI labs roughly 2 to 3 years behind on deployed compute, with some estimates pointing to an 8 times gap in capacity. And yet, Chinese frontier models trail US ones by only 6 to 8 months on benchmarks.
Which means Chinese labs have had to become brutally efficient.
Ruthlessly efficient. They rely on optimization, distillation, open source contributions across labs, and faster product loops.
And that makes Chinese models cheaper.
Structurally cheaper.
Which creates price war pressure inside China.
Exactly. DeepSeek's API runs at roughly 1/10 of OpenAI's pricing. Kimi K 2.6 is priced aggressively. HY3 Preview sits at roughly half of comparable Chinese alternatives.
So no Chinese model can easily charge US frontier-style premiums.
Not for long, because the labs that try get undercut by the labs that don't.
A brutal market.
A very Chinese AI market.
The second reason is distribution.
This is where Tencent becomes unusual. US model labs are building surfaces because they need to capture value. Anthropic builds Claude Code. OpenAI builds enterprise and consumer products. They are constructing distribution around the model.
Tencent is the inverse.
Exactly. Tencent already has the surfaces. The question is not, how do we build products on top of our model?
The question is, how do we get a model good enough and cheap enough to power the products we already have?
That is the inversion.
US frontier labs build surfaces because they need to capture value.
Tencent commoditizes the model because the surfaces already capture value.
And an expensive model is a worse foundation for those surfaces.
Exactly.
So in the US, where compute is abundant and consumer distribution is limited, you build the model.
Yes.
In China, where compute is constrained and Tencent already owns a billion-user messenger, you commoditize the model, even if your model is number one.
That is the logic.
Let's compare Tencent with the other major Chinese AI labs.
Good, because it makes Tencent's asymmetry very clear.
DeepSeek first.
DeepSeek is the pure model bet. Its API is extremely cheap. It has huge user momentum, with 127 million monthly active users, built without a consumer app, major marketing budget, or platform distribution.
It is a serious bet.
Very serious. DeepSeek's bet is that the model layer itself can be defensible if you are cheapest best.
Cheapest best is a strong position.
It is. Developers build on you, switching becomes painful, and the land grab compounds.
But DeepSeek has no surfaces.
Correct. The model is the business. If the model becomes substrate, DeepSeek becomes substrate.
Powerful but exposed.
Exactly.
Now, Moonshot's Kimi.
Kimi is the legible VC playbook. Paid subscription, strong product momentum, long context and agent use cases, around $200 million in annual recurring revenue, and a $20 billion valuation.
Investors can model it.
Yes, and that is both the strength and the ceiling.
Meaning?
A company you can model has a ceiling. Kimi is building an application business from scratch. Tencent already has variants of those surfaces inside Yuanbao and WorkBuddy.
And Tencent is also an investor in Kimi.
Yes, alongside Alibaba, so Tencent can benefit from Kimi's growth without copying its playbook.
Now, Z.AI.
Z.AI is the academic and institutional credibility play. It listed first on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange in January 2026, surged past $38 billion in market capitalization, and was named by Time as one of the world's 10 most influential AI companies.
Strong credibility.
Very strong, but on OpenRouter's developer leaderboards, its GLM series does not appear in the top 20.
So, credibility does not automatically create developer gravity.
Exactly. Being technically strong and institutionally trusted does not automatically produce ecosystem position.
So DeepSeek has model momentum.
Yes.
Kimi has product and investor legibility.
Yes.
Z.AI has institutional credibility.
Correct.
But none of them has Tencent's surfaces.
Exactly. No billion user messenger, no enterprise productivity suite, already embedded in offices, no comparable domestic distribution.
They can build excellent models.
They can attract developers, raise capital, win benchmarks.
But they cannot become the substrate for an ecosystem they do not own.
That is the key point.
Tencent's asymmetry is structural, not tactical.
Yes, the model is rebuildable in 10 weeks. The surfaces took 20 years.
The model is rebuildable in 10 weeks. The surfaces took 20 years.
That is the sentence.
And it also explains why the model leaderboard can be misleading.
Exactly. The leaderboard tells you who is hot this week. The surface tells you who may capture the user tomorrow.
Now, let's talk about money. If Tencent is making the model open and cheap, where does the money come from?
This is where Western readers have seen the playbook before.
Red Hat.
Yes. Red Hat open-sourced Linux distributions and built a $34 billion company on managed services and enterprise support.
Databricks.
Databricks built a large business around open-source data and machine learning infrastructure by monetizing managed deployment.
So the pattern is release the technology open, monetize the operational layer.
Exactly. Open source maximizes adoption. Production complexity creates demand for managed inference. Fine-tuning, integration, security, monitoring, and support.
The model is free.
Running it well is not.
And HY3 is not exactly lightweight.
No. Tencent's own repository recommends serving the 295 billion parameter model on 8 high-memory GPUs.
So this is not download the model and run it on your laptop while waiting for coffee.
Not unless your coffee shop has a data center in the back.
A very Tencent coffee shop.
But that is the business opportunity. The model's open. Production inference is hard. For many Chinese enterprises, the path of least resistance is Tencent Cloud.
So the OpenRouter ranking becomes the funnel.
Exactly. HY3 at number 1 gets attention. The open source Hunyuan family gets adoption, then Tencent Cloud captures the operational revenue.
HY3, Hunyuan Video, Hunyuan Image, Hunyuan 3D, Embodied AI.
All of them can feed the cloud business.
And Tencent's cloud revenue is already accelerating.
Yes. Tencent's Q1 earnings showed Cloud Intelligence Group external revenue growing 40% year over year.
So Tencent is doing in 2026 what Red Hat did in 2002 and Databricks did in 2018.
Release open at the bottom of the stack. Monetize the layer above.
The model is the lure.
The cloud is the business.
But above the cloud sits the real prize.
The surface.
Weixin.
Exactly.
Tencent has flagged that it is building an agent layer inside Weixin, but has not previewed the details.
Right. And that is why everyone should pay attention.
Because Weixin is more than messaging.
It is the messenger, the payments rail, the social graph, and the platform on which roughly half of Chinese mobile payment volume flows.
So an agent inside Weixin is not a chatbot.
No, it is a transactional layer.
Sitting between users and the entire Chinese consumer internet.
Exactly.
No foreign AI company can build inside it.
Correct.
No pure Chinese model lab has anything comparable.
Also correct.
Only Tencent, and maybe Alibaba through Taobao and Alipay, can build at this layer.
That is the platform reality.
So the Hunyuan rebuild, the open source release, the number 1 OpenRouter ranking, the cloud monetization funnel, all of it roots back to this.
Yes, it all routes to the surface.
The model gets the attention.
The surface holds the user.
Let's make this useful for someone listening while walking, commuting, or half reading Slack.
Very realistic.
What should they remember?
First, not every AI model launch is really about the model.
Sometimes the model is infrastructure.
Sometimes the model is a lure.
Sometimes the model is a way to sell cloud.
Sometimes the model is a way to strengthen a surface you already own.
Second,
the Chinese AI race is not one race. It is several different races.
DeepSeek is racing to be the cheapest, best model.
Kimi is racing to build a product business investors can understand.
Z.AI is racing on institutional credibility.
Tencent is racing to make the model substrate for the platforms it already owns.
Third,
watch where the model lives.
Not just what the model scores.
Exactly. Benchmarks matter, but they are not enough. The strategic question is where the model is embedded, what workflows it powers, what cloud it pulls demand into, and what user surface it strengthens.
So the question is not only how good is HY3,
it is what does HY3 make more valuable?
And Tencent's answer is our stack.
Exactly.
Hunyuan and HY3 at the bottom.
Tencent Cloud above that.
WorkBuddy and CodeBuddy.
Yuanbao.
And eventually, Weixin.
The agent layer at the top.
So the race is not only for model quality,
it is for position in the stack.
Tencent is not entering the AI model race. It is changing what the race is for.
Yes, and that is why the updated argument is sharper.
Because HY3 being number one on OpenRouter could tempt people to say Tencent is winning the model race.
But the better reading is, Tencent used the model race to pull attention into a different game.
Hy3 at number one is not the destination.
It is the opening move.
The platform layer underneath is the business.
And the surface above is the prize.
Let's end with the line I think listeners should remember.
The model is what gets the attention. The surface is what holds the user.
So let's wrap this up. Tencent released Hy3 Preview in late April, but the launch itself is not the real story anymore. The real story is what HY3 tells us about Tencent's strategy. The model may become infrastructure, while the value moves to the surfaces Tencent already owns. Yuanbao, WorkBuddy, CodeBuddy, Tencent Cloud, and eventually the agent layer inside Weixin.
The model gets the attention, but the surface holds the user.
Exactly. And that may be the better way to track Chinese AI in 2026. Not just which model is winning today, but which platform owns the place where AI will actually be used tomorrow. Thank you very much for listening to Inside China AI. I'm Gabrielle Chou, and Lucy, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Always a pleasure.
We'll see you next week for another episode of Inside China AI.